Hi, Andrew here. And since we've been on the topic of storytelling and on audience, that I contend that everyone has a story and someone will listen to it, someone needs to hear it, let's talk about building an audience. In the marketing world, this is list building, something that I need to start doing, but that's also a topic for another day. But let's talk about my first adventure in list building. Let us go back to Cowtown, southern China. And to set the stage, 2004, Deng had opened up China. Bush had admitted them to the World Trade Organization, or was that Clinton? Doesn't matter. The economy was opening up, but the population was 1.3 billion, and somewhere close to 1 billion of those, certainly 700 million plus of those, were peasant farmers living in abject and dire poverty. This was China in the in-between. It was not modern and cosmopolitan yet. It was still very poor. And where we were, it was very, very poor. How poor? There were farmers' fields beside the driveway to the university. Why? Because it was arable land, and it was a patch of land that was this farmer's to farm. And he was allowed to farm it in spite of the fact that it literally, the university walls, the university gates, the driveway, and he was right there. When we were taken on campus the first time, as we were being shown where our apartment was, there were fruit trees lining the walkways and roads. And we were told, you're not allowed to pick the fruit. That is the possession of the farmers. And it's theirs, and it's their income. And that fruit hanging on a tree was very important to their income, which was probably about $1 or $2 a day. So it was stressed to us that that was private property, private possession, and not for public consumption. Again, this is how very poor it was. It was very poor. It was very dirty. And the town we lived in was very, very noisy. It was developing. One Friday, I can't remember the exact days. One day we had gone downtown and there was a building on a corner. The next time we went by, a day or two later, there was a wall 6 feet tall surrounding it. Hand-built, brick wall. A couple days later, that building was torn down by hand. Everything was done by hand. When they poured concrete, they had these itty-bitty little trucks. Couldn't have had more than a yard or two in the drum. They poured it into wheelbarrows, walked it into the building, and poured it from there. They not exactly our standards of construction, but they whacked them up with great speed, but very, very noisy. Now, I mentioned I have sound sensitivity and misophonia. Even with earplugs, it got to be too much. I couldn't take the noise. And so increasingly, I stayed on the campus. Now, my wife would go out and she'd go shopping, and the girls, and part of the problem was there was nobody in my age group. There was one other relatively newlywed couple there, but he spoke perfect Chinese. He went to Brigham Young University and lived in China House, where you had to speak Chinese once you were in the door. So hilariously, if John and can't remember his and Wifey and I went out for dinner, if there was a Chinese person with us, and some of the Western teachers, some of the foreign teachers didn't speak a word of Chinese. They were Canadian-born, American-born. There was one who was born in Indonesia. She spoke Indonesian, not Chinese. If John was there, they wouldn't talk to him, even though he was the one answering their questions. They'd look for the nearest Chinese-looking face to talk to. Poor southern China. But he and his wife could go, they didn't have the noise problems I do, and they could go together. I couldn't take it, and there wasn't really much for me to do. And as I was twice the age of my students, there wasn't a lot of common ground. I didn't really have a peer group, so I got to be fairly lonely when my wife wasn't around as the time went on. Well, as a refuge, I would write the stories, and we had great adventures. And the funny thing about adventures is they're nasty, uncomfortable, unpleasant things while you're on them. But in retrospect, they always are better than they were when you were suffering it. It's one of those things, the idea of backcountry camping and the memories of backcountry camping are so much better than the reality, right? Well, for me anyway. So I would write the stories. And it started out as a just keeping friends and, no, not friends, family up to date, letting them know we had made it through training okay, we got to the campus okay, we had our accommodations, just, you know, letting them know, keeping them in the loop. But the story, I started out, you know, and telling the stories. And as the stories got a little bit longer, as I spent less time out there and more time in the apartment, I edited them harder and longer and tried to entertain more. And as I did that, darned if the stories, the emails weren't forwarded on, and then I would get replies from people saying, that was really neat. What else is going on? Basically, they were joining my list. And it grew organically from, you know, a few family members, like I got 2 brothers and 2 sisters and mom and dad, to I was sending out to 40 or 50 people, actually probably running into the limits of what you're allowed to send from a Yahoo Mail account. And it all grew organically, word of mouth. It turned out there was an audience for these silly stories about traveling around and working and teaching in China, about how we were in a town so poor, the fanciest restaurant in town was KFC. The problem was we ate there twice. My Tai Chi teacher wanted to take us out for a treat. I got food poisoning. I ate street food. I ate street food in Cowtown, Putian, southern China, no problem. Ate in KFC, I got food poisoning both times. And I just told these stories and had fun. And darned if people didn't really enjoy listening to them. So I stress, you have a story to tell, and somebody should hear it. Somebody needs to hear it, and you need to tell it. And it will grow organically, and you'll have an audience. And if you do this as I do, as much for therapy as it is for anything else, it doesn't even matter if you have an audience. It'll get there. But you have a story. And you can build an audience slowly and organically to people who want to hear it. So, tell your story. And thank you for listening to my story. That was my time, and now is your time. And in the meantime, do tell your story. Take care, and you'll see me soon.